Hello everyone, welcome back to the Streamyard YouTube channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at 5 audio effects that you can apply to your microphone to make your microphone sound better. There are many different ways you can set up these audio effects on your microphone. You can buy equipment that has the audio effects on them and plug that into your computer, and that will be your microphone source. You can set up what is called a VST host, which will host VST plugins. These VST plugins would be your noise gate filters, your compression, so on and so forth. Or lastly, you can do the easiest method, which is use the built-in tools on VoiceMeeter, which has noise gate, limiter, compression, EQ, and reverb and delay built into its application. And that's what we're going to be looking at in this video. Although we're going to be looking at VoiceMeeter, you can look at setting up a VST host and using VST plugins, as they'll give you a lot more control over these filters and really help you improve your overall microphone quality. But with that being said, we're going to jump into this video. Let's do it. We're going to start with the noise gate filter. The noise gate filter is often used to block out background noise that's in the environment when you're recording or streaming. A noise gate filter will allow you to set what is called a gate or a threshold at a certain volume level or a decibel level. And when you speak into your microphone and that volume exceeds that threshold, that gate will open up and allow audio through, which will mute the audio that's below the gate until that audio passes through the gate. I know I just threw a lot at you, but the noise gate essentially operates on 3 main parameters. The first one being the threshold. The threshold is going to set the location of the noise gate in a decibel value. Typically, a noise gate filter will sit right around -30 decibels. That's just on average. The next parameter is the attack time. The attack time is how quickly that noise gate will open when audio passes through the threshold. The attack time will essentially fade in the audio depending on how long you have that attack time set for. The release time is the third parameter, which is the opposite of the attack time. It's how quickly that noise gate's going to close after the volume of your voice or the volume of your microphone, the input volume, is dropping below the threshold that you set on the noise gate. Typically what we do when we're setting up the release time is we set it long enough to fade out in between the words that we speak. Typically this is sitting right around 100 milliseconds, but for you it could be anywhere from 30 all the way to like 150 milliseconds, depending on how you want it to sound. If you're using a noise gate filter within VoiceMeeter, it's much more simple than setting up those 3 parameters yourself. They have one dial that you set up, and it's that simple. So let's look at it. What you're seeing on the screen here is VoiceMeeter. If you haven't set up VoiceMeeter for yourself, check out the VoiceMeeter guide that we've done on this channel. Link is in the description below. VoiceMeeter simplifies the noise gate filter down to one dial that you have to turn up or down. What we're gonna do is set this up for our microphone. So with that being said, we're gonna take a look at our microphone source, which is on the left here, the hardware input 1. What I'm looking at is VoiceMeeter Potato. You've most likely set up VoiceMeeter Banana. It's the same exact thing, except for VoiceMeeter Potato has more inputs and more outputs, so it just looks a lot bigger. So what we're gonna look at here is the audibility section on the microphone. And on the right here, we have a gate dial. What we're doing with this gate dial is turning it up and setting the threshold. But we want to make sure we're monitoring the microphone when we're doing this. And the way we do that is by toggling on the A1 button here, which will send the microphone audio to the A1 source that we have selected in the hardware output section. So what you're going to do is turn up the noise gate until the majority of that background noise is muted when you're not talking. There's something you need to keep in mind when you're doing this though. You want to make sure you don't turn it up too high to where it's cutting into your vocals, because it will sound very choppy and it will make you sound very bad when you're streaming. So you want to make sure you're not turning up the noise gate filter too high. You just want it up enough to kind of chop out the bulk of that background noise and really help clear up that audio. The next effect we want to talk about is EQ. EQ is one of the most important filters for getting good audio quality out of your microphone. The EQ will allow us to adjust specific frequency ranges in our vocals so that we can either boost or cut those sounds to make them sound more natural and easier for our listeners. So we're going to head over to VoiceMeeter and we're going to check out the EQ that they have on that app and how you can set it up for yourself. Alright, so the EQ on VoiceMeeter is actually going to be applied to the virtual output on VoiceMeeter, which is going to be this B2 source that we select on our microphone if you followed that setup guide. And you can find that in the master section down here on the right. This is the B2 source. What we're going to do is toggle it on and then right click it. Once you right click it, it will open up the EQ window. What you're seeing on the screen in front of you are 6 different bands. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. These bands we can set to any frequency range across this frequency spectrum. We can adjust the band width and the amount of adjustment that's going to be applied in decibels. We're going to be focusing on 5 main ranges for your vocals. First, we're going to cover the main vocal range of your voice. A lot of this depends on the type of microphone that you use, the equipment that you have, and the environment that you're in. So not all of this is 100% accurate for every single person out there, but these are general rules of thumb that you should follow. The first range we're going to talk about is that main vocal range, which is going to span from about 120 hertz all the way to 250 hertz. It can vary depending on whether or not you're a male or female. If you're a female, that frequency range might be a little bit higher for you, so you might take that into account when making adjustments to your EQ. So what we're going to do here is take this first band, and I'm going to set it right at 150. Just get it as close as you can to that number. And then I'm going to make a slight adjustment to that entire range. So what I'll do is just up this by 1.5 decibels, maybe 2 decibels. You can listen to it and figure out what you like for yourself. And then I'm going to fatten or widen this band by adjusting the Q here and making the band wider by decreasing the Q value. I want the Q value to hit a wider range in the vocals there. I'll probably set it to 1.8, and that will kind of go up to about 300 hertz right here and down to 80 hertz, which is just about perfect. And that's going to cover the main vocal range of our vocals. The next EQ range we're going to talk about is the muddiness range. Oftentimes in our vocal mixing, when you're new to EQ, we overdo the low end and increase it too much, creating a very muddy vocal, and it's hard to listen to. For a trained ear, you can really spot it. The muddiness can really be found from like 300 hertz to 600 hertz, that frequency range. What we're gonna do is make just a slight reduction in that range if we have a muddy voice. So what we'll do on this next band is set it to 400 hertz, and we will make just a slight decrease to that. I'll just put it down to -1 dB, and same thing, I'm gonna make sure it's spanning across that entire range. 2Q seems to be just about perfect for that. And again, guys, like I said, this is really just depending on how you hear it and what you're listening to. You might want to increase your lower end a little bit more to get a sound that you're looking for. Toy with it and find the ranges that you like. It really depends on the microphone that you have, the environment that you have, and the voice that you have. The next range we're going to talk about is the clarity range. Clarity in our vocals is going to be where you get, well, clarity. And this range can span from, depending on your vocals, from about 1500 hertz up to 4500 hertz in total. So on average, clarity sits right around 3000 hertz on the average vocal. So what we're going to do is set this third band to 3000 hertz. And we're going to make a slight increase to this band because we want to boost the clarity of our vocals. What we're going to do is just, again, we'll do just a slight adjustment for the sake of this video, something like 1.5, 1.6 decibels. I would actually keep the band around 3Q. What you can do is adjust the frequency range here until you hear something that you like in your voice. You don't want to go too high, however, because you'll run into the next frequency range, which is the sibilance range. The sibilance range are those hard S's in your vocals. The S's are, depending on the mic that you have, can be really harsh on the ear. So we want to try and eliminate the harshness of those sibilant sounds by adjusting the next frequency range. And the sibilant sound can range anywhere from 4000 hertz all the way to 8000 hertz depending on the voice that you have. Males typically sit lower on that spectrum while females sit a little bit higher. My sibilance mainly sits around 7000 to 8000 hertz, and that's where I'm going to make my sibilance adjustment. So on the next band, what I'm going to do is slide this up to 7000 hertz. And instead of having it as a regular band type, which you see right here, I'm going to show you a new band type, which is called a notch. So I will click the one directly below it, and that will create a notch in that entire frequency spectrum. This notch is quite drastic. You don't need to take out that much of the vocal. What you can do is tighten up this notch just a bit. I would probably put it up to 10. I wouldn't go any lower than 10 because you don't need to take out a very, very large range of your vocals. And then you can leave it like that. You don't have to adjust the decibel volume because that's the band type is a notch and it just cuts out right at the frequency range that you have set. And that will help reduce that sibilant sound or that S sound that is harsh on the listener's ear. And the last range is an air range. This is typically a range that is used to boost in order to get more of an artistic sound out of your vocals. This is going to span from 8000 to 12,000 hertz. Anything above that doesn't really need boosted, to be honest. So what we can do is set this right around 10.5 thousand hertz. We'll give it again just a slight boost, and we'll widen that so that it's a nice boost across that whole range there. And that should bring in a nice air sound and a nice artistic sound into your vocal mix. The next filter we're going to talk about is compression. Compression is a very important part of vocal mixing. The reason that is because compression will bring up your vocals into the front of the mix, making you sound like the priority of the audio mix. What compression does in simple terms is compress the higher volumes in your voice and bring up the lower volumes of your voice, which is essentially narrowing the dynamic range in your vocals, or compressing or squeezing that range so that it is more full and more focused. Similar to the noise gate filter, VoiceMeeter made compression very simple. They narrowed it down to one single dial, but compression is actually fairly complex. There are four main parameters to a compression filter. You have a threshold, just like the noise gate filter. You're setting the location of that compression when it's going to be applied to the audio signal. You have the attack time, which is the speed at which the compression will be applied to the audio signal. You have the release time, which is the opposite of the attack time, is how quickly the compression will let go of that audio signal. And then lastly, we have a new parameter introduced here, which is the ratio. The ratio sets how much compression is going to be applied. This specific number is often confused when people try to explain it, so I will do my best to clarify how the compression filter works and how that ratio parameter works. The ratio is going to work hand in hand with the threshold. Similar to the noise gate filter, when the audio signal exceeds the threshold, it will start compressing that audio signal. The ratio is going to tell the compression either a 1-to-1, a 2-to-1, a 3-to-1, 4-to-1, all the way to an infinity to 1, how much compression is going to be applied to that audio signal. So let me explain. If you have a 1-to-1 ratio, no compression is going to be applied to the audio signal. Let me explain. When your audio exceeds the threshold that you set on your compression filter by 1 decibel, the compression ratio is going to compress down that audio signal to 1 decibel when you have a 1-to-1 ratio. For every decibel that exceeds the threshold, it will compress it down to 1 decibel. If you have a 2-to-1 ratio, however, it will compress down 2 decibels. It's going to essentially be halving that audio signal. So if your audio exceeds the threshold by 2 decibels, it will compress it down to 1 decibel. So if you have your threshold set to -30 decibels and the audio exceeds that threshold by 10 decibels, meaning it goes all the way to -20 decibels, it will be compressed down to -25 decibels, essentially having that audio signal. What it's doing in the process is lowering the high volumes in the audio signals and raising the low volumes in the audio signal, making that audio signal more focused overall, essentially compressing that audio signal and bringing you to the front of the mix. I hope that helps you make sense of the compression filter. Now let's take a look at VoiceMeeter and setting it up for ourselves. The compression filter on VoiceMeeter can be found right next to the noise gate filter. In the audibility section on the left side, we have a little comp. That is compression. When you increase this dial, it already has a set ratio, attack time, and release time. The only thing that's different here is it has an auto makeup gain, which means when you increase this dial, it's not only going to compress the signal, it's also going to increase the volume automatically depending on how much compression you apply. This is important because you'll want to watch how much the volume of your microphone increases so that you can decrease the volume afterwards to make up for the auto makeup gain, which is kind of a headache, I understand, but it does make it a little bit more simple when you're setting up compression versus doing it manually by setting all the parameters yourself. So what we're gonna do is increase this. Let's just say we'll increase it to about 4. And what I notice is that there is a slight increase in the volume, right? So what I'm gonna do is just decrease the volume on my microphone source, just a hair, to make up for that makeup gain. What you'll run into is when you're doing this, if you do this too high, the volume will get too loud, and then you'll need to make sure you make up for that by decreasing the volume so that you can save your viewers' ears. I really suggest that you don't crank it all the way up to 10. I would keep it fairly low, you know, a little bit goes a long ways, but listen to it, get used to it, and find a location that works best for you. The next audio effect we're going to talk about is the limiter. The limiter is fairly important when vocal mixing because it does help you when live streaming to avoid destroying your listeners' ears by getting too loud. The limiter will allow us to set a threshold, so to speak, at the location of which we want to cap our audio signal, or the loudest point in the audio signal, a location in which we don't want the audio signal to go past. So let's take a look at it on VoiceMeeter. On VoiceMeeter, you can find the limiter in the audio meter on the hardware input. So if you go and left click in this meter here and then drag down, you will see the limiter. Typically, you want your limiter set at least at 0 decibels. If you're going over 0 decibels, you're going to have clipping, and you're really going to annihilate the listener's ears for sure. So make sure you have it at least set to 0. If you want to go a little bit lower than that, you can. I wouldn't go past -10. You are going to have some issues with the limiter filter if you set it too low, and that audio signal is frequently hitting the limiter, you're going to have, you know, some choppiness or some clipping in that audio signal, and that will kind of ruin the quality of the audio overall. So make sure you're not lowering it too much, but you do have it at a point it will prevent the audio from getting too loud. The next audio effect we're going to talk about is reverb. Reverb will help your vocals sound a little bit more natural, and it will add what is called sustain to that vocal. Reverb is often used for singers because it will increase that overall fullness, and that sustainability of those notes when you're singing sounds really nice in the mix. However, reverb also will kind of flush the vocal back in the mix, kind of washing it out overall and not having that, you know, fullness and stuff that you get from that compression and bringing the vocal to the front of the mix. Reverb kind of does the opposite of that, and it will kind of wash it out in the mix a little bit. So it really depends how you use reverb. It's a bit complicated, but if you are singing, reverb is a very valuable tool for you, and reverb is actually built into VoiceMeeter. So I will take a quick look at showing you how you can set this up for yourself. Reverb on VoiceMeeter is kind of in a weird spot. You have the special effects section here. You increase this dial, doesn't really do anything. What you have to do is go over on the right here in the special effects section and adjust the reverb by turning it on, and you can right click it, and then all of a sudden you have all these options here. There are all kinds of different presets built into this reverb. You can find that in the middle section of this window here, right? And you can select different presets by clicking these buttons here, and this will kind of change the overall effect of the reverb. You have the dry and wet dials, which are going to essentially be the gain of your vocals, the amount of delay, and the amount of decay. It's important that you toy with these dials. This isn't typically something that you would use in a regular like vocal setting, but it is very, very often used for musicians and instruments and singing. The next audio effect we're going to talk about is delay. Delay is similar to reverb, but it works differently. Whereas reverb kind of changes the environment of the recording, delay is going to take the notes from your vocals and repeat them over and over again based on the settings that you have set up for the delay. When you're doing vocal recording, typically you want to pick between reverb or delay. You don't typically want both of them running at the same time. So keep that in mind when you're toying with either of these settings. And same goes for reverb, which I didn't mention a minute ago. You want to make sure you're using these very lightly. You don't want your mix to be too dry or too wet. You want it to sound natural, but you still want to add that sustainability and add that slight effect to it, bringing out a nice natural sound in that vocal. Delay is similar to reverb and VoiceMeeter. It's built in the same way, so we're going to take a look at that so that you know how you can set it up for yourself. Let's do it. Same as reverb on VoiceMeeter, the delay is in the special effects section. We're going to crank it all the way up to 10. Then we're going to head over to the special effects over here, and we're going to turn it on. We're going to right click it, and then you have the different parameters of delay. And by the way, I just right click that button to open this window. You have the dial here, which sets the amount of time in which the delay takes effect. So 500 milliseconds is how quickly that delay will start delaying. And then you have the amount of the filter, you have the pan, whether it's going to be left or right. And then you can also adjust like the latency in which the pan initiates, all that stuff. It's a very complex filter. You also have the gain and the amount of gain that will be applied, and the dry and wet knobs over here. This filter, same with the reverb filter, are both filters that you want to use probably fairly lightly when you're doing just overall typical recording. If you're doing like singing and artistic things like that, these two filters are going to be very useful for you, and learning how to set them up for yourself will be very important. Unfortunately, I don't have a ton of technical experience with reverb and delay. I can explain to you what they do and why they're used, but but I can't quite tell you how to set them up for the effects that you're trying to get. I can just point you in the right direction as far as what these dials do and why you would use them if you were interested in using them. So I hope that really helps you. I know I threw a ton of information at you in this video. I hope I made it as simple as possible for you guys as a beginner. I really enjoyed making this video. If you enjoyed watching it, I would appreciate it if you left a like and subscribe to this YouTube channel for more content just like this. I want to thank you all so much for watching this video. If you guys have any questions after watching this video, feel free to leave them in the comment section below, and I will do my best to personally respond to those questions and answer them as thoroughly as possible. Again, thank you for watching, and I will catch you in our next video. Peace out.